What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from SBMTG down there on the YouTube.com. We like magic. Today is the final day of Eldritch Moon Spoilers, Friday, July 8th, 2016. So we got like 100 cards that got spoiled today, and that's kind of a lot of cards to go over. So I'm just going to pick my top 25 cards. We're going to do 25% of the things that were spoiled today. This is my top 25 right here. A quick note first on how this list was put together. This is all stuff that I personally like, first and foremost, but it's also stuff that's not just good in limited, although a lot of it will be good in limited. It's also stuff that I think may have actual real main deck pro magic potential. And it's also, especially, you know, the first 10 or 15 cards, stuff that I think has budget deck potential. And the only other note before we get started is that I'm not going to be reading out the cards today, because that would add on like another 10 minutes, and who wants that? So let's go ahead and get to it. Here's where we actually start the list though. Number 25 of the cards spoiled today, at least, is Bloodbriar. I just really like the look. I like the cut of its jib, you know what I mean? I like the cut of its hair. But the card is not too shabby looking, you know? As long as we have another dedicated sacrifice outlet, it looks like it can get pretty big. But again, just budget deck potential. I don't see this seeing like any actual standard play. It's just a cool, like, it caught my eye, you know? And I figured it'd be a good one to start the list. It's a pretty unique card that could theoretically get pretty big. Here's another thing that could theoretically get big. It's actually kind of similar and would work fairly well with the last card. This right here is Liliana's Elite, and I'm not, again, really sure of the standard playability, but in budget decks, I could definitely see this being a thing. And I will point out that, like, when I started playing Magic, we had Lurgoyf from Ice Age, and that's very reminiscent, except that card was considered really, really good. And this card costs less, is more splashable, super similar, you know? It's just like, the days of Lurgoyf being amazing are gone, but just seeing this and it being comparable to a card I used to love kind of caught my eye. But also, again, this card could get reasonably large. My number 23 is Clear Shot, which is pretty darn good instant speed green removal that also provides a buff. There's nothing not to like about this card. I mean, 3 mana, you make a case that that's bad, but like Ruinous Path costs 3 mana and that's sorcery speed. Although Ruinous Path is like better. It takes up Planeswalkers, has Awaken, all of that. So I do not mind this card though, because it's sort of a better fight mechanic than we normally see. You know, Rabid Bite was reminiscent of this, but this is, you know, just as good, maybe better than Rabid Bite. I really like the buff on it, so really wanted to point it out. And the fact that it's instant speed is phenomenal. Here's 3 good cards. We've got 3 red combat tricks here, basically, and I just wanted to show them to you all at the same time. So numbers 22, 21, and 20 are Borrowed Hostility, Abandoned Reason, and Distemper the Blood. Borrowed Hostility is the one that catches my eye least here, but it definitely goes along with Titan Strength fairly well. You know, it'll probably replace Titan Strength once that card's out of the format, but right now it's just like copies 5 through 8 of Titan Strength effectively, and it'll probably go somewhat well in these like Storm Chaser Mage decks, so that doesn't look terrible. But Abandoned Reason and especially Distemper of the Blood look pretty fine in the, you know, Vampire Madness deck. Especially, again, Distemper of the Blood doesn't look bad at all, honestly. 1 mana for that buff and trample isn't terrible, because that deck looks like it's going to be trying to play really, really fast. And Distemper looks like it can help with that. And Abandoned Reason, honestly, just looks, you know, somewhat similar and spreads out the buff. But I don't think it's as playable as Distemper, but still, you know, eye-catching. Again, not too bad, and may not make it into the final version of budget vampire decks, but is still a reasonable, you know, a madness option. You'll notice that this first half of the list is backloaded with red cards. I saw a fair amount of good red cards, especially for limited play today, and a couple that had good design, including this guy right here. This is Stensia Innkeeper, and I think that she's not too shabby. She looks underwhelming at first, but as an older player, she reminds me of Avalanche Riders a little bit, except you don't have to pay the Echo, and you get an extra point of PT. So they're really, really helping make up for you not actually destroying the land, but you're still tapping down a land for a turn, which can have a lot of implications, you know. I don't think it goes into the like actual, you know, vampire deck, but I do think it'll look fun in either a budget build of that deck or maybe a pseudo land destruction build, because we're reaching some sort of mass on that deck where we might be able to put together land destruction and it'd be at least somewhat convincing. You know, and I hate that Wizards doesn't print land destruction. I know they say it's not fun, but a lot of people had a lot of fun with it. And like Stone Rain was a capstone card for a long time. That was an important card in Magic, and sort of one of the things that Red did in the color pie. And we can't have Stone Rain. Like, why don't you just reprint Stone Rain, but instead of any land, just basic? You know, just destroy target basic land. Would that make it a little bit better? I just want LD back. And this is the closest thing we get to sort of Ponzi in this entire set. So I'm a fan of the card. I'm not sure how good it is, but I am a fan. Here's another one like that. Number 18 is Shreds of Sanity. And it doesn't look amazing or anything, but there's a couple of things to point out about the card. It could go in the sort of red-blue instance deck, whether that's a Storm Chaser Mage deck or a Thing in the Ice deck with maybe Chaos Reveler. This could go fairly well in that. 3 mana is kind of a lot, but the effect is really nice. You get back 2 cards. It's not quite card advantage, unless you can get something with Madness off with this, in which case it's pretty darn good card advantage. And I like the way it's worded in that you get the 2 cards back from your graveyard, and then you discard a card. So you can pick something up with Madness that's in your graveyard, and then discard a card and get the Madness on it. That's not bad either. My number 17 is Foul Emissary. I like that first ability kind of a lot. I hate that it's just on the 1/1 body. And I have heard this mentioned with Company in the same sentence. I don't think Company's going to play the card. Probably not, because Company's not going to play too much Emerge stuff, and the card looks really good with Emerge, obviously. I will say that 3 mana things are the things you're going to be wanting to use with Emerge the most often. A lot of Emerge costs are 7 mana. You play a 3-drop, 4th turn, you can sacrifice a 3-drop and play the card with Emerge. So a 3-drop is where you want to be as far as Emerge goes, or at least it looks that way. So the card's good as far as that goes, very good with Emerge, and the first ability's fine. So I like a lot about it, but I'm just not really sure where it slots in. It's just that a card like this just has so much text and 2 relevant abilities on it, may see play somewhere. My number 16 is Waxing Moon, which a lot of Wolves players have asked for more or less expressly this card. I like the speed on it. I like that it just also gives your dudes trample. All the cards good. It just keeps doing stuff for you, And mostly the reason it makes the list is its interaction with Ulrich. That seems really nice right there. You can also transform your Breakneck Rider or whatever, So that looks good too. But mostly because of its interaction with Ulrich, I like this. Whether you're flipping him to his front face or his back face, something awesome is going to happen. So Waxing Moon looks good, and again, it's exactly one of the things that Wolves players wanted. So here you go. My number 15 is Fogwalker. And I know that it's pretty high up the list here, but I like the card a lot. It's another thing for the blue-white tempo deck that's focused around spirits. I like the card a lot, and it combos well with another card that we'll see way on up the list here. So I do think that it's a nice 2-drop, which the deck needs maybe 1 or 2 of, but Spirits is obviously looking good, and this may just sneak its way in. My number 14 is a card that might be slightly better than it reads at first. This is Alchemist's Greeting right here, and I don't want to pay the 5 mana for a Grasp of Darkness, basically. Nobody wants that. But you can pay 2 mana for a Grasp of Darkness, which is more or less the going rate. Obviously, the deck that wants this is Red-Black Vampires, and that deck already could play Grasp. I just don't know if it wants to, or at least if it could play this instead, will it still play Grasp? Maybe. That's an issue that will be resolved in testing. But I do like that the deck has 5 second turn free discard outlets, So you go into turn 3 and you got a bunch of free discard outlets that you can play on turn 2. You go into turn 3 and suddenly this becomes not bad at all, You discard it for free, you pay the 2, you still got a mana up, you kill a guy, and then you have mana to spare. That's not bad. You go into combat after having killed a guy, and you just smash in. So early in the game, I don't mind the card at all. I think it's a fine 3rd turn play with all of our vampires that we have to discard cards to make them good. So I don't mind the card. I think another card that might sneak its way towards playability in those decks, because they're really looking for options that look an awful lot like this. My number 13 is another weird one, and it's also pretty high on up the list here, but you'll see. This is Terrarian right here at number 13. And my reasoning is that Chromatic Spear and cards like it are pretty much always good, more or less. The big problem here is that this one enters the battlefield tapped, which sucks. That kind of sucks. But it can fuel Delirium in this format. It's always good to have extra artifacts that can do that. We'll see what we get when Kaladesh gets here, because there'll probably be a lot of Artifice in that set. But for right now, this isn't too bad. Cards like this usually serve some sort of function. It depends on the rest of the meta at the time. And I'm not sure what we've got in the meta that this really helps out other than Delirium. But all I'm saying is that historically, cards like this are usually very good. My number 12 is Vampire Cutthroat. I know, a weird 1-drop all the way up the list like this. I actually think this serves a very important purpose. I think that the Red-Black Vampires deck really needed another solid 1-drop creature. And this doesn't look super solid when you first read it, but it's really good when buffs are applied. And a lot of there's a lot of cards in Vampires that buff. Condemned, Drana, a couple of other things even. So, Olivia can buff things. So after a buff or 2, this card is actually pretty impressive for just the 1 mana. mana. And that deck really needed another playable 1-drop. And this may replace Insolent Neonate, if you were even playing Neonate to begin with, honestly. So this card may replace it, especially considering that deck looks like it just wants to be as fast as possible, and you gotta play 1-drops if that's what you're trying to achieve. So the card looks okay to me, and gotta point this out, really good 1-drop for like a budget Audric deck. This card could really be good in Audric. My number 11, and we're about to be in the top 10 here, my number 11 is Primal Druid right here, and I think the card is a little bit more impressive, again, than it reads at first, you know. For ramp decks, this is something you can play early, go up the board, get a couple of blocks in, and eventually chump block, and get ramp out of it. That seems actually pretty good. I mean, it's not going to be super often that you get the ramp the same turn cycle that you play the card. And your opponent's going to not want to remove this sometimes, which is actually kind of good for us. You know, if they're not swinging in with 3-power dudes, that seems pretty good on our end, especially in a ramp deck, because either way, whether they deter from swinging and we can help our life total stay the same, or if this dies and we get ramp out of it, we've done the thing we want to do. So the card just looks really good in these ramp decks. I'm not sure it quite makes it or not, but I am a fan. Let's get into the top 10 here. This is where we start hitting some pretty good stuff. First thing, though, is Scour the Laboratory, which I think is very, very borderline standard playable, to be honest. Again, blue wants instant speed, card draw that gives it card advantage. That's exactly what this is. And although Delirium may be tough for blue decks to pull off, not totally sure, actually. But if they do pull off Delirium, this is just a ridiculous card. 4 mana for 3 cards at instant speed is just an amazing refill, and it's great card advantage. And even if you end up playing this for the full cost at the end of your opponent's turn, you still haven't gotten completely gypped. 3 cards is always good. Card advantage is nice. And the fact that you did it at the EOT is also good because you get to untap right away. So I think this card might be, at least for the time being, what those control decks are looking for as far as a refill goes. My number 9 is Savage Alliance. Don't overlook this. A lot of people are overlooking this card. I actually think that it's a really interesting piece of sideboard tech against a good bit of the format right now. Not only will Trample help you out against the big tokens boards and white aggro boards and such, Trample's not bad, but also dealing the damage to everything is pretty darn nice too against the tokens build. That's not bad. Or against the white aggro build. A lot of their creatures have the 1 toughness. That's cool. And the other option, just dealing 2 to a guy, not bad either. So, I mean, I could see taking out a 2 toughness creature and then killing like 2 other guys in white aggro for 4 mana. That's not bad, man. And again, against tokens, it's good. So I just see this as interesting sideboard tech against 2 of the more popular decks in the format. I wouldn't sleep on this. It's not terrible. My number 8 is Desperate Sentry right here. This is just cool. This is another kind of card that I like. It's like a sort of a beefed up Doom Traveler. Doom Traveler, though, a creature that when it dies you get a better creature. This is the same thing. When it dies you get a better creature. But I just like the card so much, and it's reminiscent of Doom Traveler, a card that I absolutely adore. But I wanted it to take sort of a place of prominence on the list. I just really like the design. And again, I like that unlike Doom Traveler, this thing can be a respectable creature in its own right. My number 7 is a weird one, but I do like the card. This is Prying Questions right here. And a lot of people, again, have maybe written this one off, but I'm a big fan. First of all, Red Black Burn is kind of shaping up. We got Incendiary Flow. We saw this. We have Alms of the Vein. It might be at least fun to build a sort of red-black budget, burn deck. This is the fun part. It's stapled onto a Chittering Rats effect. And that's always a really, really annoying effect, It basically feels like they won't get to draw a card next turn. You put them back a turn in some ways. I've always really, really liked this effect. It's always super annoying for our opponent. And they just threw 3 damage on there. So I actually think the card is interesting, although, usually something like, this sort of tempo play is in decks that aren't trying to go super fast. But, the 3 damage indicates a deck that's trying to go pretty fast. So I'm not really sure. The card looks really weird, but it does 2 things that I really, really like. My number 6 is Thermo Alchemist. Again, I just love cards like this, sort of a Gelectrode effect, although this one's really, really cheap. 2 mana for this is fan-freaking-tastic, and notice that it's each opponent. That's really cool, that it's each opponent on a commander board. But I even like to try this in Standard, Again, in the blue-red spells deck, this looks like it could do a fair amount of damage over the course of a couple of turns if it stays out. Not a bad 2-drop at all, I love things like this, and this one looks pretty pushed. If you ask me, usually things like this are a little worse, I guess. But this is just good all around. I'm a fan. My number 5 is Thraben's Standard Bearer. Surprised to see it all the way up here on the list. A couple of explanations. First of all, it compares with Cryptbreaker, a card I really like, although the creature typing and a lot of different things, the deck that it goes in no way makes the card as good as Cryptbreaker. Cryptbreaker, the deck that it goes in wants it really, really bad. I'm not sure as far as this one goes because I don't like discarding the card, but I will say that this will trigger Thalia's Lieutenant. That's pretty cool. If you're playing Militia Captain, this helps well with that. And the only thing I'll really say, the only thing I'll say aside from that, is that right now the white aggro deck and the red-white aggro deck plays Anointer of Champions as a 1-drop. And I feel like this is probably better than Anointer of Champions. Especially if you're packing Thalia's Lieutenant. This is likely better, although again, I'm not sure that deck wants to discard cards, So it's kind of a toss-up, but end of the day, just a thing that triggers, either creatures entering the battlefield or Thalia's Lieutenant, those different abilities. Every single turn is good, and it's a decent way to turn top deck mode into a guaranteed creature every turn too. So I do like a few things about the card. I'm not really sure it sees play, but it is fairly pushed, especially for a common. Like that about it. This is Fury Blade Vampire, yet another free madness outlet on turn 2 for these vampire decks. Only this one I think is really important because it can get to 4 power. Yet another 2-mana 4-power creature that you have to do some work for. But I really, really like this card a good bit for those decks, and I do think it could go in. I definitely do. I want to test with this because the deck got an awful lot of 2-mana madness outlets for free, by the way, just free madness, or free discards at least. But I think this one may be one of the more relevant ones. Don't sleep on it. It looks a little weird at first, but I definitely think just getting to 4 power on turns 3 and 4 for this thing, really, really good. Again, that deck looks like it's trying to play as fast as possible, and this goes a long way towards that. My number 3 is Impetuous Devils, the only rare that we saw all day, the final rare spoiled, and yeah, that means that there's uncommons better than this in my book at least, and some of the cards we've seen may actually be better than this. I just like the fact that this is, this is a rare, so it sort of occupies a higher place on the list, and is a very, very good card if you haven't noticed, by the way. Reminiscent, obviously, of Ball Lightning, but not quite as fast, and therefore not quite as good, because that's the whole point of Ball Lightning. But this does have a sort of removal clause stapled onto it, and note that you get to target the creature that they're going to block with. Like that's the guy you're blocking with. They don't get to pick it, you get to. So that's also good, You can take out a guy and probably trample over for a few damage while you're at it. And even though this is a 4-drop and not a 3, like Ball Lightning was, that's really one of the main attractions of BL. But this, even though it's a 4-drop, still pretty fast, honestly, and can take out a dude, definitely, no matter what. So, big fan, actually, of this, and it could see play if Mono Red Aggro really tries to be a thing, but I don't think we've seen all the pieces for Mono Red Aggro. We might have to wait for Kaladesh on that one. But, the card does look like it could eventually go in a pretty strong Mono Red Aggro deck. My number 2 is Nebelgast Herald, which is that's a hell of a name. But this is not Pestermite. Note that it's not Pestermite. But it is really good as far as a fixed version goes, and it's got a really cool tribal ability on it in that anytime you play any other spirit at all, you can tap a guy down. That's really good, and this has flash, and it flies. Like, so many good things about this, and can really round out our curve well in a tempo deck. You can play it during their combat step, and it's basically a bounding Krasis in a lot of ways. That's cool. You can play it during their EOT, and then swing with it on your next turn. That's cool. Really, really good tempo play in a lot of ways is this card, and it's almost definitely, certainly, no matter what, going to see play in that Spirits deck. That's actually why these last couple of cards are so far up the list, hey Igby, is that I think that they almost certainly definitely see play. And that's the same story with number 1 here. Number 1 is Hamlet Captain. Hamlet Captain, where's Macbeth Lieutenant? It's a dumb joke, but still, Hamlet Captain looks pretty freaking strong to me, and may replace Consul's Lieutenant in these green-white humans decks, because a lot of them are still playing Lieutenant. Although it could also play alongside Lieutenant, copies 5 through 8 or whatever of Lieutenant. So that's good too, but I know that this card, the worst thing about it is that when it attacks, sure, all your humans get the buffs, but this thing has a huge target on its back and could die. Now, I think that a lot of times you're only going to need 1, maybe 2, but the 1 buff is good enough. And that seems like a fantastic interaction too. I definitely think the card will see budget deck play, but I am super serial that it might see actual real green-white humans, big boy standard play. So that's my top 25. The entire list is spoiled, though, for this set. So if you want to, I'll leave you a link to Mystic Spoiler in the description. You can go check out the rest of the set and see what's going on. That's all the content we got for now, but there's a lot more coming up. Not only will I be doing the top 10 upcoming deck techs, like I always do, a video for that at the beginning of each standard. So look out for that, and tell me in the comment section of this video what decks you want to see most in the upcoming standard. So we're going to have deck techs coming up very, very shortly after that. I'm already brewing a couple of things up. Vampires and spirits mostly, but you know, I'm really just looking at spirits and really brewing vampires hard. But let me know what else you want to see, and I will get it out to you as quickly as possible. If you enjoyed this content, do the YouTube stuff, like it, share it, comment on it, want to know how you felt about this list, and I will see you guys next time. I'm Deb from SBMTG. Thanks for watching, my wizards.